Would you like to learn how to turn defeats and setbacks into successes and to allow the highest and best to come of things that look like there's none there? I'm Dr. Roger Teal. We're going to talk about that today, and I urge you to stay tuned. Well, good morning and welcome to New Design for Living. We are on step 4, I believe, of a prosperity series entitled Your Passport to Prosperity. And today what we want to look at as we seek to have what we call the prosperity consciousness is what we can do all the time in our lives to help setbacks and defeats get transformed into victories. You know, sometimes it's like having that image of that little sprout or that flower beneath the concrete, and it looks like it's for all the world dead and no possibilities, but it draws on something to adjust that situation, and that strength allows it to burst forth through that concrete and to go ahead and blossom. And that same thing's available to you and me. We can bring about the highest and the best even when it looks like things are down and out for us. Now, what we call this, we could call it many names, but today I want to call it the law of adjustment, the prospering law of adjustment. And what I want you to begin to consider is that there's a force in this universe which works constantly to guide and to heal and to restore and to renew. It's constantly pressing against us, seeking to do these things if we will learn to cooperate with it. Now, the great teacher, Jesus, put it this way. He said, and you're seeing this on the screen, "It is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom." Now, the kingdom isn't a faraway or distant occurrence. The kingdom is the presence of spiritual good, the answers, the ideas, the possibilities. And what he's saying is that those are given right now, always available. And our founder, Dr. Ernest Holmes, said something that I end almost every show with, and that's on your screen also. There is a power for good in this universe greater than we are, and we can use it. So what those are saying is that there is an action of God or an action of infinite intelligence that is constantly working for us, constantly seeking to bring about and to bring forth our good. And so we're forever the center and the focus of this universal creative principle that wants to work through our affairs, through the things of our lives, to bring about greater power and abundance. Now, why is this so? It's so because you are a spiritual being. You are a spiritual being, made in the image and likeness of the life source. Now, if you are a spiritual being, what that means to you and me is that we are spiritual activities. All right? If I'm a spiritual being, then I am a spiritual activity, meaning I'm an activity of something more than I probably know myself to be. I'm an activity of the greater love, intelligence, power, and light of this universe, and I can act like that. I can let that spiritual nature of me express more clearly and purposefully day to day in my life, and especially when it looks like things have got me trapped. I can let that work. You are not, then, you are not a cut-off, isolated organism with very little hope or possibilities, having a whole string of bad luck. Unless you think you are that. Unless you believe that that's what you are. And then, in that case, using the creative power of belief, you would tend to be creating circumstances that victimize you. Circumstances that seem to confirm the belief you have that you're cut off, that no good is there for you, and that it's always going to be bad luck. So it's all how we use the creative power of our perception of life. And there is a creativity to that. And that's why the victim consciousness is something we speak about a lot. Because if we believe ourselves to be victims of all these forces with no possibilities, then we actually creatively set that in motion and bring situations that seem to prove us right. And we say, see there, that just proves it. And we pull back and we bring more of that on, and it just goes in this endless cycle, and we're holding back that law of adjustment, that power that wants to go forth through us to guide us to something better. You see, there's another possibility, and that is that you are a vehicle for the flowing forth of life's creative spirit. Now, when we know that, things can change. In the life of the great Michelangelo, one winter he wanted to go down to Rome to sculpt. he had many, many artistic skills, as we know, and he wanted to sculpt down there. And he went down there and he looked around for some marble, and he was looking for the Carrara marble. I guess that was the cream of the crop marble. That was the best stuff. But when he got there, what he found out was that there was hardly any left. It had all been taken by other sculptors, and all that was left was this big, misshapen, broken piece of marble. Now, he could have rejected that and started complaining about his bad luck, but what he did was he sat down in front of that marble, and he cleared his mind, and he gazed into it. And all of a sudden it came to him how he could create a figure with an arm going a certain way and a head going another way. He realized he could create a wonderful likeness of David with his slingshot facing Goliath. And he went to work, and the rest is history. Probably the greatest piece of sculpture on the planet was created out of that despised and rejected piece of marble. And it's so great that it sits in its own room in the great art gallery in Florence, probably the greatest art gallery also on the planet. But it's the cream of the crop. And I like that message to you and me, that a beautiful, precious treasure could come forth out of the despised and rejected. That can happen if we'll let life work through us. But so often, our human intellectual mind begins to complain about what we think we've been given to work with in life. We say, oh, I don't have enough of this or that. I don't have the raw resources. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough this, or I don't have enough time. I don't have enough. And we get so caught up in that not enough consciousness, and we begin to complain about it, but we make it right. We shut down our creative abilities and things don't work. What are those really? But excuses. Excuses. That's sometimes tough medicine to take. But I know that our breakthroughs occur when we begin to notice all the excuses that shut down the greater possibilities in you and in me. Let's not place a limitation before the great Spirit within us. What we need instead is to work with it, to cooperate with it, to rely upon it. And we'll see that it'll adjust a situation that looks hopeless into something, something great if we'll allow it to. Excuse me. Now, our biggest problem is that we're out of touch. We're out of touch with our source. We fall into a sense of distance from that source, and so we do some weird things with that. First of all, we fall into weird ways of praying when we're out of touch. We start praying to inform God of all our troubles. Oh, God, let me tell you how terrible it is for me. Do you think God wants to hear any of that? When God sees you as a being of tremendous potential and gifted with a divine dream within, but we pray to inform God of all our troubles and how much we deserve help, almost as though we expect that infinite intelligence to descend to the level of our own troubles. Thank God it doesn't do that, but it does wait for us to become more aware. Jesus said, your Father knows the things you have need of before you ask. Isn't that wonderful to remember? So I don't need to pray informing God of all of this. It's already given. It's already given. So what prayers do is lift my awareness to that truth, that there is an incredible abundance of ideas and power and opportunity waiting for me to accept them in my mind and heart. And when I do that, then I fulfill my responsibility, and that law of adjustment can come in and adjust things and bring miracles where we thought there were none. Now, another thing we do is we get caught up in the whys. We say, why me? Why me? Why did this happen to me? And that really puts us in the quicksand mentally. Very little good comes out of that, and we usually fall into self-pity. Have you noticed that? And that really is non-productive. I love the story of this guy who went to his son and said, and his son was a teenager, and said, son, we're going to take a family picture. We're going to spend a lot of money at it, and we're going to mail these out for our Christmas cards and stuff. So what I need you to do is you haven't had your hair trimmed in the longest time, and you keep it dirty most of the time, and that's your business, but for this picture, you got to trim your hair, cut that hair, and clean up. And the son said, no, I don't want to do that. It's my hair. I don't want the stupid picture anyway. You know how teens are. I don't want that stupid picture anyway. I don't want to do it. No, I don't want to do it. And the father said, all right, give me the keys to the car. Until you're willing to do that, you're going to have to walk. So the kid gave him the keys and stomped off mad and came back later. He said, you know what, Dad? Many centuries ago, there was this pretty great guy. He was called Jesus. You ever heard of Jesus? And Jesus had long hair, they say. And you know, he was walking around the desert and stuff and all that sand and dirt, and his hair was probably dirty. And he didn't have to cut and clean his hair. And his father looked at him and says, yeah, but he walked all over. He walked everywhere anyway, didn't he? So we get caught up in all these whys and everything, and it just pull us down. What if we say, hey, what good can come from this? What good is there for me? We also get caught up in delays, and we start worrying. We start worrying that it seems like doors are closed. But usually that means that there are better doors waiting for us if we learn to work with this law of adjustment. We could affirm some things like this and start lifting ourselves up. I accept my idea or something better. You see, that's an openness to something better. And we could also affirm God's perfect good fortune is now operating in all aspects of my life. That would turn things around. Let's summarize where we are. There's this law of adjustment that ceaselessly seeks to bring us greater good and the answers we need. But we close it down because we're out of touch with our source. Our prayers go awry and we get caught up in the whys and we worry about delays. But we can't accept the greater good that is waiting for us. So do you believe that there is this good fortune awaiting you? Divine good fortune, perfect good fortune. It can work through any situation. The human mind can judge the situation as hopeless, but that's nothing to that power that can work in you and me. There's no insoluble problems for it. Let me give you another illustration that comes out of the Bible. It's the story of Joseph. I really love this story. He was the favored son of Jacob. You remember that? Jacob made for him the coat of many colors. You remember that one? Well, you know, Joseph had a lot of brothers, and they didn't like him at all because, of course, he was the favored son and everything. And for instance, at one point, Joseph was with them and said, you know, last night I had a dream. He said that to his brothers. We were out making sheaves of grain, and your sheaves stood up, and so did mine, and your sheaves bowed down to mine. And they thought, well, yeah, all right, you think we're going to bow down to you? You got another thing coming. And then a couple days later, he said, you know, I had another dream, and the moon and the sun and the stars bowed down to me. And they said, boy, this is it. That weirdo, this is it. We're done with him. And so secretly they conspired to do away with their brother. So one day, Jacob sent Joseph out to check on his brothers who were tending the sheep, and they saw him coming. They said, hey, here comes the weirdo, you know, and they conspired to kill him. And they were going to just kill him outright, but Reuben, one of the brothers, said, no, let's just throw him in a big pit and let him starve to death, because Reuben had it in his mind that he was going to come back and rescue and save Joseph. But at any rate, they captured Joseph, took off the coat of many colors, threw him in this pit, and sat down to have their lunch. It was lunch break, you know. And so as they were having their lunch, this traveling band of Ishmaelites came along, and they decided to sell Joseph as a slave to these Ishmaelites. They took the deal, and the Ishmaelites took Joseph and left, and then the other sons got some blood from a goat that had been killed and stained the coat of many colors, took it back to Jacob and said, your son has been killed, and he mourned and grieved very terribly. Now, as the Ishmaelites took Joseph away, they took him to Egypt, and there they sold him to be a slave in the house of Potiphar, which was the captain of the guard for Pharaoh. Now, Joseph had this something in him that was constantly knowing that good would come out of something terrible. It saved him from being killed, and here he was, a slave servant to Potiphar. But he started drawing on that something, and in a short amount of time, he had sort of proved himself and worked himself up to be like the captain of the house. He was sort of running Potiphar's house, and so he'd made something good out of that situation. Well, Potiphar's wife kind of took a liking to Joseph after a while and tried to seduce him. Joseph wouldn't have a thing to do with it, and eventually Potiphar's wife got mad and framed him and told Potiphar that Joseph had tried to work his ways with her, and Potiphar got irate, threw Joseph in jail and said, you're going to rot there. So there was Joseph, back again, imprisoned and in jail. But he kept that spirit going. And he allowed spirit to adjust that, and it wasn't long before he was like the favorite helper of the captain of the guard. He was even allowed to do some guard duty. He was beginning to run the prison. Now, about that time, the Pharaoh of Egypt was having some troubling dreams, and no one in the land could adequately interpret those dreams, and Joseph was very good at that. So he asked to go before the Pharaoh, which he did, and Joseph interpreted the dreams beautifully. he told Pharaoh, what they're saying is that there's going to be 7 good years here in Egypt and then 7 famine years. And Pharaoh realized that was the accurate interpretation and then set up Joseph to be the head of the land, his second in command. So from prison to second in command, and Joseph went ahead and stored up all the grain necessary to see them through the famine, and the famine did come along in 7 years. Now, back in his homeland, his father Jacob and sons were starving because there was no food there, and they'd heard there was food in Egypt. So they went to Egypt. And Joseph disguised himself and brought them before him and gave them certain tests. But then later, and they bowed down to him, by the way, just as the dream said they would, he revealed himself and forgave them. And he said something we need to hear today. He said, "You meant evil against me, but God meant it for good." And we can look at the things of our lives and say, oh, you meant this for lack, or this looks like lack, this looks like non-support, this looks like devastation. But God can mean it for good. Good can work through it. That's that law of adjustment. So here's what we can do this week to invoke this prospering law of adjustment. Number 1, hold out for possibility. Get control or take control of your mind, and remember there are always possibilities. Number 2, become still and know. Listen within yourself. Turn off that mind that's saying it's not going to work, it's all going downhill. Be still and know. Pray affirmatively. Affirm the truth about you as a spiritual being, that the answers will be there for you. Thirdly, give thanks in advance. Give thanks. Affirm. God means this for good. And perfect good fortune comes forth in my life. Affirm those things thankfully. And then finally, step out in faith. Actually step out in creative action, knowing that the law of adjustment is guiding and advancing and overcoming and blessing and prospering you. And you will know that there is that power that never deserts you, and it is here for you. Now I'm going to have Mary Jane tell you some very important things, and then afterward I'm going to come back and we're going to have a very powerful meditation. So stay tuned. I'm real grateful for you. Thanks for being with us today on the program. Remember to get these tapes on prosperity and to soak our awareness in them, as well as reading Ponder's book. It'll be very powerful. Call us. The 800 number will be here in just a few moments again, or you can write us. And don't forget those Marianne Williamson tickets. I've worked with Marianne before. She's a wonderful person, a great light. You'll want to be there November 28th to hear her. Call us for that. And tell a friend or two about the program, because there's so many people seeking to find ways to have life work better. And again, thanks for being here. And until we're with you next week, remember, there is a power for good in the universe greater than we are, and we can use it. Now is the time that we need to get centered and let go of those old outer judgments and allow this law of adjustment to go to work in our life. So take a deep breath. Relax, become peaceful, and let's know together there's only one life. That life is God. That life is perfect love, intelligence, light, peace, and power. It is this life source's good pleasure to give me the kingdom whenever I accept it. In this moment, I let go of all my old judgments about the impossibilities of life, for a sense that there wasn't enough for me. And I now realize that I'm surrounded by all that God is, and all that God has for me is given me now. I now invoke the law of adjustment to work through me and to show me the way, to reveal new answers and new possibilities, and to harmonize all the situations of my life. I realize that no matter what I face, God means this for good. And I further know perfect good fortune comes forth everywhere in my life. And I am so grateful to know this is so. I now relax in peace and move out and act in confidence. And I know my life now moves forward. I give thanks for the coming forth of miracles and unexpected good, as I know this power works in me. I accept this as so. Thank you, Spirit, for the good fortune that showers down upon my life. And as I let this be so, thankfully and gratefully, I know it is so. Amen.